The dim glow of a phone screen flickered in the darkness. Sophia squinted at the message, her pulse pounding in her ears. "You don't know who he really is." Her fingers trembled as she reread the words. A joke? A wrong number? The sender was anonymous, just a string of digits she didn't recognize, but something about it made her stomach twist in knots. Lying in bed next to her, Daniel stirred slightly, his breathing deep and steady. His face was relaxed, peaceful, as if he had no secrets to hide. But Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She looked at the clock, 2:37 a.m. Her mind told her to ignore it, go back to sleep, but her gut told her otherwise. She tapped out a quick reply. "Who is this?" No response. Minutes passed. Then, just as she was about to put the phone down, it vibrated again. Check his emails, check his bank statements, don't trust him. A chill ran down her spine. She turned, her head slightly to glance at Daniel. The man she was set to marry. The man she had trusted with everything. Sophia swallowed hard. Was this some cruel prank? Or was there something she didn't know? Her heart pounded as she slid out of bed as quietly as possible. She moved through the darkness like a ghost, reaching for Daniel's laptop on the desk. She hesitated. Did she really want to do this? Taking a deep breath, she lifted the screen. The soft blue glow illuminated her face as she typed in his password. Incorrect. Her stomach dropped. She tried again. Wrong. Daniel never changed his password. Ever. Why would he? Now, the room suddenly felt colder. Her hands grew clammy. She turned to look at him again. He was still fast asleep. Or was he pretending? Another vibration from her phone. Be careful. He's watching you more than you think. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. A shadow of doubt turned into full-blown fear. What had she just stepped into? Sophia sat frozen, her hands gripping the laptop as if letting go would send her spiraling into the unknown. The message on her phone echoed in her mind. Be careful. He's watching you more than you think. Her eyes flicked back to Daniel. He hadn't moved. His steady breaths filled the room, but now they felt calculated, rehearsed. Was he really asleep? Or was he aware of everything? She exhaled shakily, her heart hammering against her ribs. She needed answers. With careful, deliberate movements, she placed the laptop back on the desk and slipped her phone under her pillow. The night stretched endlessly as she lay beside him, feigning sleep while her mind raced through the possibilities. Morning arrived too soon. The alarm buzzed, slicing through the uneasy silence. Daniel turned over, groaning. You okay? You look tired. Sophia forced a smile. Just couldn't sleep. He kissed her forehead, his lips warm and familiar. Maybe I'll make you some coffee before work? She nodded, watching as he disappeared into the kitchen. The moment he was out of sight, she lunged for his phone on the nightstand. Locked. Of course, but then something. A notification. A bank transfer. Her breath hitched. The sender's name was unfamiliar, but the amount, a staggering sum, sent a wave of nausea through her. Footsteps approached. She barely had time to put the phone back before Daniel returned with 2 mugs in hand. Here you go, he said, setting one down in front of her. His eyes lingered on her face. You sure you're okay? Sophia forced another smile, wrapping her fingers around the warm ceramic. I'm fine, she lied, but deep down she knew she wasn't fine at all. Sophia's fingers tightened around the coffee mug as she replayed the numbers she had seen on Daniel's phone. The transfer wasn't small. It was the kind of money that made people disappear. But who was the recipient? She forced herself to sip the coffee, her mind spinning. Was Daniel in trouble, or was he the trouble? I was thinking, he said, interrupting her thoughts. We should take a weekend trip, just the 2 of us. Maybe get away from all this stress. Sophia swallowed, hard. A trip now? Was this an innocent suggestion, or something more sinister? That sounds nice, she lied, forcing a soft smile. Where were you thinking? Daniel leaned against the counter, his expression unreadable. Somewhere quiet, no distractions. Her stomach twisted. She needed more information before she went anywhere with him. That night, as Daniel slept beside her, Sophia carefully reached for his phone again. She had been reckless before, but this time, she was prepared. She had spent the entire evening memorizing his habits, his routines. The screen lit up. Her fingers moved quickly, accessing his recent transactions. Her heart stopped. There were dozens of transfers, some to names she didn't recognize, others marked with only a single word. Cleared. Then, her breath hitched. One of the transactions was to someone she did know. Her sister. Sophia's entire body went cold. Her pulse thundered in her ears. What was Daniel doing sending money to her sister? She barely had time to process it before the phone buzzed in her hand. A new message popped up on the screen. We need to meet. She's asking too many questions. Sophia's breath caught. Who was this message from? Her sister? Someone else? Every possibility sent her spiraling further into uncertainty. A floorboard creaked. She froze, gripping the phone tighter. Slowly, she turned her head toward the doorway. Daniel stood there, watching her. His face was unreadable, his eyes locked onto the phone in her hand. Couldn't sleep? He asked, his voice calm. Too calm. Sophia swallowed, willing her voice to stay steady. Yeah, just checking the time. Daniel didn't move. He didn't blink. The air between them felt suffocating. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he smiled. Come back to bed. She forced a nod, placing the phone down carefully as she slid under the covers. But sleep was impossible now. Because she knew. Daniel had seen everything. Sophia's hands trembled as she stared at her sister's name on the transaction list. It didn't make sense. Why would Daniel be sending her money? And such large amounts? Her thoughts raced, colliding into each other as she tried to make sense of it. Had her sister been hiding something from her? Or worse, were they both keeping a secret? A floorboard creaked behind her. She spun around, heart hammering against her ribs. Daniel stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. What are you doing? His voice was calm, too calm. Sophia's mind scrambled for an answer. I was just checking the time. Daniel's eyes flicked to his phone in her hand. A long silence stretched between them. Then he smiled. You should have just asked me. Her breath caught in her throat. Something about his tone sent a chill through her body. He stepped closer, the air between them growing heavy. I was actually going to surprise you, he continued, his voice smooth. Your sister's been struggling, and I wanted to help. I thought it would be better if you didn't know, so you wouldn't worry. Sophia's pulse pounded. Was he telling the truth? Or was this just another layer of deception? She forced herself to nod. I appreciate that. Daniel studied her for a moment longer before finally turning away. Get some sleep, he said over his shoulder. Big day tomorrow. She exhaled slowly, watching as he disappeared down the hallway. The moment he was gone, she reached for her phone and dialed her sister's number. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. Dread settled deep in her bones. Something was very, very wrong. Sophia barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind filled with worst-case scenarios. The unanswered call to her sister gnawed at her. Was she in danger, or was she part of something bigger? By morning, she made a decision. She needed answers, and she needed them now. As Daniel prepared to leave for work, she watched him carefully, every movement, every word. Was he acting different, or was she just seeing him in a new light? I'll be late tonight, he said, sipping his coffee. Meeting ran over, so don't wait up. Sophia forced a smile. Okay, be safe. The moment. The front door clicked shut. She grabbed her keys and rushed out. Her sister's apartment was across town. Sophia parked down the street, scanning the building. No signs of movement, no lights on inside. Her stomach twisted. She knocked, once, then twice. Silence. She pulled out her phone and called again, straight to voicemail. Something wasn't right. Pressing her ear against the door, she listened. Faintly, something shuffled inside. A breath. A movement. She knocked harder. It's me, Sophia! Open up! A pause. Then, finally, the door cracked. Open. Her sister stood there, eyes bloodshot, face pale. Sophia's heart plummeted. What's going on? She whispered. Her sister glanced behind her, as if someone might be listening. Then, she grabbed Sophia's wrist and pulled her inside, locking the door behind them. You shouldn't have come, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Sophia's blood ran cold. What have you done? Sophia's heart pounded as she stared at her sister, whose trembling hands twisted the hem of her sweater. You need to leave, her sister whispered, glancing toward the window as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's going on, Sophia insisted, lowering her voice. Daniel's been sending you money. Why? Her sister flinched. It's not what you think. Then explain it to me. Tears welled in her sister's eyes as she took a shaky breath. I was in trouble. I borrowed money from someone I shouldn't have. Sophia's stomach dropped. Who? Her sister hesitated, then whispered a name that made Sophia's blood run cold. A name she knew well. Daniel's boss. Sophia staggered back. Daniel's involved in this. Her sister wiped at her tears. He was trying to protect me. The money, it was to keep them from coming after me. Sophia's mind reeled. Everything she thought she knew was unraveling. Was Daniel truly the villain, or had he been shielding her from a truth far worse? A sudden knock at the door shattered the moment. Both women froze. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then a voice from the other side. I know you're in there. Sophia's blood turned to ice. Whoever it was, they weren't here to talk. Sophia held her breath as the knock came again, harder this time. Her sister's grip tightened around her wrist. They won't leave, her sister whispered, eyes wide with fear. They know I'm here. Sophia's pulse pounded. Who are they? Her sister swallowed hard. The people I borrowed from. If Daniel's money didn't clear everything. They want more. A deep voice cut through the silence. Open the door. We won't ask again. Panic surged through Sophia. She glanced around the apartment. No back door, no fire escape within. Reach. Trapped. Her sister wiped at her tear-streaked face. I have to face them. No, Sophia whispered sharply. Not alone. Her sister hesitated, then slowly reached for the doorknob. The moment the door cracked open, a hand shot out, grabbing her sister by the arm. She let out a small gasp as a man in a dark suit stepped inside, his presence overwhelming the tiny apartment. Sophia stepped forward instinctively. Let her go! The man barely glanced at her. His focus was on her sister. Where's the rest? I don't have it, her sister stammered. Daniel paid most of it, but not all of it. His voice was smooth, too calm. And that's a problem. Sophia's mind raced. How much? The man turned his gaze on her, studying her. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a slip of paper. He held it out. Sophia took it with shaking hands. The number scrawled across it made her stomach drop. This is due by tomorrow, the man said. No more extensions. With that, he released her sister and walked out, closing the door behind him. The silence left in his wake was deafening. Sophia looked at her sister, whose face had drained of colour. "We have less than 24 hours," her sister whispered, "or they'll come back. And next time, they won't just be asking."